الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتهدون الذي بعد فلا يرى وقرب فشهد النجوى تبارك وتعالى والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين وشفيع المذنبين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم وغاصب حقوقهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. صلوات We thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us this opportunity to fulfill the duty of the Azhar of Sayyid al-Shuhada. This is the 9th gathering. With the blessing of the Azhar of Sayyid al-Shuhada, we have been discussing this concept of Islam being the religion acceptable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a religion which is for all times and for all places. Islam will never become obsolete or outdated. And it has everything to do with understanding this process of continuity and change, which is the theme of my discussions in these nights. And just to continue and connect with the thought process that we started with, that when we look at the i'tiqadat and the system of belief, there's no room for change in that. With the passage of time and the difference in the location of Muslims, God will still be one. He will not become 3. The Imams will still be 12, not 13 or 14. Quran will still be the final revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There will be no new edition of that message of Allah. And so when it comes to the i'tiqadat, there is no room for change there. Of course, there is room for understanding our fundamental beliefs with new evidences. Like science comes up with new things, and that becomes a window for us to appreciate the power and the glory of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you can have new evidence, but the proven belief would still be the one which we had 1400 years ago. When we look at the second part of the discussion, and that is about the system of rituals, ibadat, there you will see it's mostly continuous, continuity is there with the elements of change. All those things which depend on natural resources or the level of knowledge and technology of a society, those are impacted upon, by time and space, zaman and makan. And so you have certain constant values, but different ways of doing that. And then we came to the main part of my discussion, and that is what we call mu'amalat and fiqh, which has to do with our lifestyle, our way of life. Whatever is not part of i'tiqadat and ibadat comes under that third category. And that's where we see that the process of continuity and change almost goes hand in hand with one another. We looked at the process of migration and the example of hijab as a constant value and the variable forms of, following that constant value. We looked at, the phenomena of how in the quest to find a Western context for a Muslim culture in this part of the world, we need to study this society. So to study the phenomenon of modernity was very important. We looked at the three negative elements. We discussed about it. Last night we ended with a discussion of a positive element from the Western society, the modern Western society, and that was the value of knowledge. And we talked there also that in Islam, the value of knowledge, the importance of seeking knowledge is a constant value. It will never change. Zaman and Makan will not diminish that importance of seeking knowledge. But the methods of seeking knowledge would change from place to place and time to time, and we have to keep ourselves always updated as far as the Islamic requirement is concerned. Salawat. Tonight I wanted to talk about one more element of positive, dimension of the Western society, and again, use that as a way of explaining what I talk about continuity and change in Islam. But before I go there, I would like to go back to one phenomenon that I discussed, I think 2 or 3 nights ago, about the issue of generation gap. I've been emphasizing that one of the hallmarks of the modern Western society is this issue of rebellion against traditions of the forefathers. And this is explained as generation gap between the parents and the children. The values have not continued from one generation to another. In that discussion, especially in the Urdu part of my Majalis and that night, I used the term of a situation in U.S. where a Shia girl says to the father, when there was a conflict about her going to her prom night program in the ashra of Muharram, and the father is saying, this is the Ashura week, you can't go. Where she uses this term, your Ashura and my prom night. When the daughter, a Shi'i daughter, says to the father, your Ashura, the gap is already there. The father and the mother failed in inculcating that law for Ahlul Bayt, where the daughter says, Ashura is yours and not mine. And this is something we have to really think about. One of the young parents came to me and talked about it more and brought up some more examples, and I thought maybe there is a need to go back to that theme before I go to the theme that I have for tonight. Salawat. And that is to do with the issue of, observing the celebrations of other religions in this part of the world. December is coming. We live in a society where, majority are Christians. Whether we like it or not, we hear about it, we see, we observe. Christmas is coming. On a commercial level, there is no problem in going and benefiting from the sale. But my point is that now that we have moved to the western part of the world, are we allowed to celebrate the birth of Nabi Isa? And this is something we have to think about it. And this is, again, we have to be very careful about it, what is constant and what is changing way of doing things. You see, when we talk about hijrat and migration, Muslims migrated from Arabia to different parts of the world, in Asia, in Africa. Many people in those areas, indigenous people, became Muslims also. But in that process, when it came to their aqidah didn't change. Those Muslims who were immigrant Muslims to other lands, or those who were new Muslims in those new lands, they adapted the aqidah system in totality. There was no compromise. That I come from a Hindu background, so maybe, for 2 years allow me to still worship the idols. And then I'll come to worshiping one God. No. When it came to ibadat also, the Muslims, wherever they went, did the ibadat with the flexibility that Islam has given to them about certain, changing aspects of it. But you will see that when it came to their lifestyle, gradually, change came in. The language changed, their cuisine changed, their clothes changed according to the environment. And then we see, but the main point is that when the Muslims, for example, went to India, they saw that the Hindus are in majority. They did not start celebrating the religious festivals of the Hindus. Or those Hindus who became Muslims did not say, because we are culturally Indians, religiously we have become Muslims, but will still celebrate, Diwali and Holi, for example. No, we don't see that. And so when you look at that, that's where you come to realize that when it comes to religious festivities of the areas that we moved in Hijrat, we have to draw the line. We cannot, start saying, okay, we live in this society, there are certain religious celebrations that they do, and so we will also do it. No. Just as the Muslims, for example, who went to Syria, which was a Christian area, they did not start celebrating Christmas, just like the Muslims who went to India, for example, did not start celebrating, Holi and Diwali. Similarly, the Muslims who have come here have to keep in mind that yes, we are in Canada. We are in a country where the majority of the people are from the Christian background, but that's their religion, and we have our own religion. When you talk about Surah Kafirun, لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد. I don't worship what you worship. You don't worship what I worship. At the end we say, لكم دينكم ولي ديني. You be with your religion, I will be with my religion. When it comes to religious issues and celebrations, we have to keep that distinction very clear. A Muslim will not participate in a religious ceremony of the Christians, nor do we want a Christian to come and participate in the religious ceremonies of the Muslims. To come and observe is one thing, but to be participant is something else. When we look at this ayat, لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد, according to the tafasir that we have from our Ahlul Bayt, they said one of the contexts in which this surah was revealed that the mushrikeen wanted to make a compromise with Rasulullah. They said, why don't we come to an agreement? Maybe 6 months you worship our idol, the other 6 months we will worship with you. And this is where the ayat comes in. لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد. I don't worship what you worship. You don't worship what I worship. لكم دينكم ولي دين. We are not going to mix things and confuse the next generation even more. You see, sometimes we are told, well, do not we believe in Isa ibn Maryam? Is he not one of the Ulul Azm prophets? So what is the problem? My question is, where was Isa in your Aqidah when you were back there? How come here you are more concerned about Isa? It's not really Isa. It is the peer pressure. So don't put it at the expense of Isa ibn Maryam. Yes, we believe in him. We respect him. He's one of the Ulul Azm prophets. 5 among the top Anbiya and Mursaleen. And this is not just an emotional statement that I'm making. I'll give you the example of the Prophet himself. How do we know Isa ibn Maryam? How do we know Prophet Musa alayhi salam? We know them because of Rasulullah. We know them because of the Quran brought by Rasulullah. Did Rasul, when he came to Medina, let alone, Makkah, where mostly people were mushrikeen. When he came to Medina, majority of the people there, well, not a majority, but a sizable minority was of the Jewish community. And there was also interaction with some of the Christians there. Rasul is the one who is saying that I have not brought a new message. What I have brought is continuation of what Adam and Ibrahim and Musa and Isa brought. I am following the same line. But even then, when it came to establishing a religious identity of the Muslims, Rasulullah said, no. We are not going to do what they do. We will have our distinctive ways of doing things. We will have to form our own different and distinct identity as followers of Islam, of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Salawatullah. How many days we have in the week? 7 days, huh? Not more than that. According to the Bible, God created the dunya in 6 days, became tired, rested on the 7th day, and that's where you have Sunday. Holiday. Of course, we don't believe in that theory. So you have 7 days. We also believe in that 7-day week. Sunday was already there when Rasulullah came into Medina as the holiday of the Christians, the day of worship. Saturday was already there from Friday evening till Saturday evening. This is the holy day of the week for the Jewish people. And they were in a large minority there in Medina. Rasulullah wanted to have a day of worship for Muslims. If he was just going to follow what Isa and Musa had done, it would have been very easy. Select Sunday or Saturday. But no. Rasulullah wanted to have a distinctive day for the Muslims only. So we didn't go with Sunday. We didn't go with Saturday. We went with Friday. There you have the special weekly prayer known as Salatul Jum'ah. And that is our weekend. Of course, we have a problem here. Maybe after 100 years, we will have 3 days weekends in Canada, depending on the demographics. They accommodate the Christian, holiday of the week and the Jewish holiday of the week. Well, we have Friday. But of course, we don't say you worship the whole day. It's just during the midday time that you have to find time to go for Jummah prayers. After that, فَإِذَا قُضِيَتِ الصَّلَاةِ فَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ. Once the salat has ended, spray it in the earth and go and do your business and seek the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salawat. So the holy day of the week, Rasulullah didn't go with the method of Ahlul Kitab. What about the way of announcing the timing of the daily prayers? The Jewish people had this system of blowing the trumpet, and the Christians have this church bell. When the namaz started, there was no adhan initially. Many times those people of Mecca who had their own farms outside the town, sometimes they'll look at the sun and they'll say Zawar is Zohar time. By the time they reach to the masjid, the namaz is already over. So they came to Rasulullah that can we have a system where the time of the azan is announced so everybody can come at this proper time to the masjid. Rasulullah was waiting. Some came and said, why don't you use the Jewish method of blowing the trumpet at the time of namaz? So old people, will know about it. Some say, why don't you use the bell that the church has, for example? And Rasulullah said, no, I don't want this one or that one. Again, he was looking for a distinctive Muslim way of announcing the daily prayers. According to the Shia perspective, Rasulullah was waiting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until Jibreel comes down with a system of Adhan, which Rasulullah taught to Amir al-Mu'mineen, and Amir al-Mu'mineen taught to Bilal, and Bilal became the first muazzin of Rasulullah in Medina. Salawat. Even the Qibla, the direction where we stand for prayers. In Mecca, it was Jerusalem. In Medina, it changed to Mecca. Just think about it. He is right there in Mecca, Kaaba is there, but the Qibla is Al-Quds. There was a problem because Kaaba is the house of Allah, but it was occupied by idols. Right in front. Didn't seem appropriate for him to face, the house which is filled with idols to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there, temporarily, the Qibla of Muslims was the Qibla of the Jewish people. There were no Jews in Mecca. Then Rasulullah comes to Medina now. And you have a sizable Jewish minority there. What happens now? The Qibla changes. From Jerusalem, it turns to Mecca. There are different reasons there. Of course, one of the immediate reasons was the ayat of Quran where the Jewish people used to taunt Rasulullah that, oh, what kind of religion is this? He's following our Qibla. And Rasulullah didn't like it. In Surah Baqarah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَقَدْ نَرَى وَجْهُكَ تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. Rasulullah felt so much hurt by this taunting that he wanted Allah to resolve this problem for him. And it seems that he used to, in the courtyard of his house, at night time, he will be looking at, not saying anything, but pleading that, oh Allah, get me out of this problem. And so Allah says, قَدْ نَرَى تَقَلُّبَ وَجْهِكَ فِي السَّمَاءِ. Oh Muhammad, we saw you turning your face, towards the heavens. And so, oh Muhammad, we are going to change the Qibla for you. The Qibla that you like. And then the order goes to him first, that turn your face from Al-Quds towards Kaaba. And then the Muslimin are ordered that. And so when we look at the issue of the day of the week, which is holy, when we look at the method of announcing the prayers, when we look at the Qibla, we see that Rasulullah, when it comes to rituals, wanted to have a distinctive way that Muslims would identify themselves as a distinct community different from the Jewish and the Christians and the other religious communities around. Salawat. So yes, in our process of migration to the West, our language will change. English would be the dominant language here. The test of tongue of our children will change. There will be time when you will see in Tabarruk they wouldn't have samosa. They would probably, prefer French fries to that. But those things are not that important. Those changes are not really important. Even the option in the clothing would change. But when it comes to the issue of maintaining our religious festivals, we have to make sure our children understand that, value those days in our Islamic calendar, and do not mix our festivities with the festivals of other religions in this society. Salawat. Muslims went to Syria and the Eastern Europe. They didn't celebrate Christmas. Muslims went to India. They didn't celebrate Diwali or Holi. Now that they have come to Canada, there is no basis to say we should be celebrating Christmas. And if anyone comes to you and say you are not a true Canadian if you don't celebrate this, tell them you don't know the history of Canada. We have an advantage here. This is the land of immigrants. It's not the land of Christians or Jews or Muslims or Arabs or Europeans. Situation in England is different, in Germany it's different, in France it's different. Here, everyone, all communities are communities of the immigrants. And so you have to know that. How come I don't see the Jewish community here celebrating Christmas? And they are still Canadian. Nobody questions their loyalty to the country. I don't see the Christians celebrating the Hanukkah. And nobody says, oh, they are not true Canadian. And so this expectation that because we live in this part of the world, we should be celebrating the religious celebrations of other community is not a valid basis for bringing this bid'ah into our community. Salawat alayhi. Rituals are not only rituals. Rituals actually are the obvious way of identifying ourselves as a religious community. It is through our rituals that we say we belong to the Shi'i Muslim community. Our children have to understand sometimes there would be tension between certain things that we do here culturally and our religious, occasions. And this is where we have to teach them from childhood that sometimes when that tension comes in, it is the law of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad which has to prevail over our other preferences. When we talk about the issue, Muharram is coming in, let's say it's the 7th Muharram to the day of Ashura, and that is the day where you are having your graduation. It is difficult. But if it's the day of Ashura, you really think about it. Do you give value to that day of Ashura? Or that celebration of graduation? Even if you don't go, you'll still be able to get your photo with the hat and the gown and the certificate. If you don't go, still you will get the certificate. But if you don't go on the day of Ashura, what have you gained and what you have lost? This is where you really think about it. We have this tradition of celebrating birthdays. There's no problem there. But then maybe my child's birthday happens to be sometimes, because the Islamic calendar is changed according to season, it is in Muharram. What do? We have to explain to them that, okay, this year, and you have to plan it accordingly. Maybe we'll do it a month before. Or maybe we'll delay it a month after. So that the children from that age know that, okay, there are certain things, when there is tension, it is the religious events which will prevail over our own personal likes and dislikes. Salawat alayhi. And therefore we see it's important to sit down with the children when we, and alhamdulillah, there is an awareness. At least when we talk about marriage ceremonies, we look at the calendar. It shouldn't conflict with any sad event in the history of Ahlul Bayt. Because the sixth Imam says, Shi'atuna yafrihunana bifarhina wa yahzanunana bihuznina. Our Shi'as are those who are happy with our happy occasions and are sad with our sad occasions. And so these things have to be taught. You know, our own societies were different. But here we have to make sure, we have to pay extra attention to make our next generation know that sometimes there would be tension, and that is the price you have to pay to be a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salatu wassalam. Salawat. The society is willing to accommodate. It is for us to be proud of our own religious heritage. You know, in Canada, in Toronto at least, I know all the high schools, school boards. We are constant in communication with them. They do not only accommodate the Muslims, but even other religious communities. And the teachers are told not to schedule the exams on the religious holidays of any community. Even in universities, sometimes they have this exam on the day of Ashura. And we have a form letter, you know, issued earlier, where they can take it, and basically when they give it to the university would be able to reschedule the exam of the students on that issue. Salawat. Salawat. This is first time for everything. This is first time in my life. We just turn this off. No, it's not my phone. I'm still okay. It is off. Salawat pढ़ने के बाद. The topic that I wanted to discuss for tonight, but I've already taken more than half of the time, was slightly different, and that was the issue of participation of Muslims in the political process of the West, as an example of continuity and change in our religion. Let me just, briefly go through it, since that was the theme, because tomorrow night, inshallah, being Shab Ashur, I would like to dedicate the whole Majlis on this issue of continuity and change in the perspective of the rituals of Azadari. That will be the main focus, and inshallah we'll present it in such a way that even the young people will be able to appreciate why we do the things that we do in the Azhar of Sayyid al-Shuhada. But the theme that I had for tonight, let me just summarize it. And that was the issue of, now that we have moved to this part of the world, one of the questions which comes up, that after a community has gone through the early stages of establishing itself, the next generation or the generation after that, should they be participating in the political process or not? It might seem a new mas'ala, but it is not. The Shia community has always been a minority community, even in the Muslim societies, mostly. And so these issues were there. When we look at the perspective of the Shia Islam on this issue, we see that the things are very clear as far as the Imams of Ahlul Bayt are concerned, that any government headed by a zalim ruler is to be avoided totally. You are not allowed to cooperate with an unjust government. During the days of the Imams, we see that on the one hand, there are so many ahadith of the Imams forbidding people from being part of the government of their time. But then on the other hand, we have example of some of the prominent companions of the Imam who even were in the positions of ministers. One of them, Ali bin Yaqtin, was a minister of Harun al-Rashid. And so we see, on one hand, the ahadith are very clear that you are not allowed to work for an unjust ruler. On the other hand, we see this example. There's no contradiction. We can reconcile that by saying that there were certain situations where some of the Shias were, the pressure was quite a lot because of their talent and their ability to get involved in the government administration. But during the days of the Imams, when they were hazir, it was easy. They could go to the Imam of the time and seek permission. If the Imam would allow, it's okay. And if Imams do not allow, it's haram. In the cases that we know where Imams had allowed some of their Shia companions to join the governments of the rulers who were known to be unjust, they always put a condition. That these are the conditions and the restrictions in your work. And this is where we see that our ulama have come with a formula where they say, كَفَّارَةُ عَمَلِ السُّلْطَانِ إِعَانَةُ الْإِخْوَانِ. That if you work with an unjust government, there is a kafara you'll have to pay. And the kafara is that you will do whatever is within your power to help your brethren in faith. That is the condition. And there are so many examples. Time doesn't allow me to go into it. But the main point of whether we can join in a government or not is the issue of justice and injustice. Shi'i Mazhab promotes this issue. That if you see a situation where your participation in that system is going to improve the situations of the people in general and the Muslims in particular, as far as, expanding justice is concerned or promoting justice is concerned, then your participation is acceptable. It is permissible. But if you see that your participation is not going to have that result, then you are not allowed to be part of an unjust system. That's the general ruling that we have. We have examples of the ulama, especially in Ghaybat-e-Sughra's time, and soon after that, where some of them cooperated with the rulers of the time. And everywhere the situation was same. If they consider the ruler to be promoting justice, they will cooperate with them. But if they realize that there is no hope of justice in this government, they stayed away from those systems. Salawat on the Ikbar. Even when it comes to, working with non-Muslim governments, when the Mongolians basically, Halaku Khan, invaded Middle East, destroyed Baghdad, and brought the Khilafat, Abbasid Khilafat to the end, in the 7th century of the Islamic calendar. A prominent Shi'i alim by the name of Muharram Tusi worked with Halaku Khan. And his action itself has become a matter of discussion among ulama. What he did was right or wrong. And basically, if you study his life, you'll come to realize that he saw that if I just stay away from him, Halaku Khan is non-Muslim, he is zalim, has no appreciation for knowledge, the way they destroyed the libraries and the books, the way they killed even scholars. But Halaku Khan was impressed with the knowledge of astrology of Muharram Tusi. These were people who believed in stars and this and that. And he actually had expertise in that area also. And that is how he started respecting him. Muharram Tusi realized that there is an opening. I can change the views of this person. Bring down the level of his zulm to a lower level. And that is where he allows himself to work with the government of an unjust non-Muslim ruler. Salawat. We have come to the western part of the world. The world is no more bipolar. There was a time when the religious books used to say the dunya is divided into Darul Islam and Darul Kufr. The abode of Muslims and the abode of Kafirs. Now, it's not bipolar, it's multipolar. You have countries where you have Muslims in very large number as minorities. Especially when you look at now the migration of Muslims to Europe and North America. So things have changed. We cannot necessarily say this is Darul Kufr and Darul Iman. There is also a third category brought by our Mujtahideen where they are saying Darul Aman. There are certain countries which are neutral to Muslims. They don't have a treaty with Muslims, neither do they oppose or fight against Muslims. And this is where we have to realize that when we look at our migration here, and this question comes up, religiously, is it acceptable to get involved in political process? My answer would be yes. Number one, this is a democratic system where our freedom of, practicing the faith is guaranteed. You are sitting here in Vancouver, doing your azan, without even worrying about anyone. I don't have to worry whether RCMP or CIS is going to, censor my words. Although they listen, but that's their responsibility. We shouldn't be that naive that they'll listen to whatever we say. Yes, we know that. But we don't say anything which is illegal anyway. So we don't have to be worried about it. But we have this freedom of sitting down and have our religious discussion, religious ceremonies. What about the Shias who are in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia now? What about the Shias on Jeddah? The Shias in Medina? A Muslim country, but they don't have the right and freedom to do azaf, Sayyid al-Shuhada. In UAE, there are restrictions of time. After 10 or 11 p.m., nobody is allowed to gather in any Husseiniya. They have to conclude their program with that time. So we live in a different situation. We have to appreciate this positive element of this part of the world. But when it comes to the practice of our religion, there are no restrictions there at all. When we talk about the issue of human rights here, and the issue of regard for law and order in this part of the world. And these are the issues that we have to keep in mind. And this is where we would say that, our participation will be for the betterment of the future of Muslims in this part of the world. If you don't participate, what happens in this system? You will just be sitting there. Decisions would be made on school board level, on municipal level, on provincial level, on federal levels, and then we'll sit down and complain that these laws are, affecting us, negatively. Well, what did you do? This government and this society does not stop you. They are not just saying participate in the economic, development of this society. You can even be part of the decision-making process. And so we have to look at these issues, and when we talk about the future generation, we don't have a choice to be on this side. We have to get involved. Of course, the niyyat is very important. A Shia Muslim cannot go into a political process on any position just for the sake of their career building. It has to be with the niyyat of promoting justice and fairness for the citizens in general and the Muslim minority in particular. If that is the niyyat and if that is the intention, then from the Shari point of view, that would be an acceptable process. Salawat alaykum. Shia mazhab is based on adl. In Usul al-Din, we talk about adl. when we talk about our own religious traditions. Our pesh namaz has to be adil. Our mushtahid has to be adil. At all different levels we talk about adil and justice. To the extent that if we have a choice as a Shi'i Muslim between a ruler who is Muslim and zalim, and a ruler who is non-Muslim and adil, what will be the choice of a Shia? A kafir just ruler is to be preferred over a Muslim zalim ruler. You look at the example of the first hijrah to Abyssinia. What was the basis of that? Rasulullah said, go there because this Christian king of Abyssinia is an adil, just ruler. Allama Majlisi, by looking at these sayings of our imams on this issue, has coined a term very beautiful where he says, al-mulku yabqa ma'al kufr wa la yabqa ma'al dhulm. He says, a government can survive with kufr, but it cannot last with zulm. So we will always oppose zulm, even if it's done by Muslims. And we will always promote and support adl, even if it is at the hands of non-Muslims. Salawat alayk. Why didn't Ali resort to sword to get his khilafat? And I'll repeat my advice of last night, that now I'm going towards Urdu, but I would urge those brothers who don't understand Urdu to have patience and sit down for 10 or 12 minutes, because it doesn't take that long to come to the end of the majlis. Especially these nights are the nights of azhar. When the Canadian Prime Minister talks on an official, ceremony, since there are two official languages, he talks in English and French. He moves from one to other. There are many in the audience who don't understand French. Nobody stands and goes away. So we have to appreciate this system that we have. We are going through that phase of transition, and even if you don't understand Urdu, if you try to listen to the words I'm using, maybe you will follow what I'm trying to say. Salawat. अली ने खिलाफत के लिए तलवार क्यों नहीं उठाई? इसलिए कि अगर आप खिलाफत को बमाने हुकूमत समझते हैं, तो अली की नज़र में हुकूमत जो है मकसद नहीं है, बल्कि वसीला और ज़रिया है. It's not an objective. It's a means to something else. गोल क्या है हुकूमत? मकसद हुकूमत का इक़ामे अदल है, अदल और इंसाफ बरकरार करना. और जब मकसद ये हो तो वसीला भी सही होना चाहिए. सकीफा के बाद एक वाक़या हुआ, लेकिन उससे पहले हम एक और वाक़या बयान कर दें. जंग जमल के बाद गालिबन एक काफिला हाजियों का आ रहा था कूफे की तरफ, इराक की तरफ. रास्ते में गुजर हुआ कैंप साइट जो अमीर मोमिनीन के लश्कर की. उन्हें जब मालूम हुआ कि इमाम हैं, तो वो आए वहाँ करीब के हमें इमाम से मिलना है. ये हाजियों का काफिला बैठा था खेमे के बाहर. अब्दुल्ला इब्न अब्बास जो कजिन भी हैं और कॉन्फिडेंट भी हैं अली के, बहुत करीब थे, बेतकल्लुफी थी दोनों में एक लिहाज से. वो आते हैं खेमे में, देखते हैं कि अली अमीरुल मोमिनीन खलीफतुल मुस्लिमीन अपने जूती जो खराब हो चुकी है, टूट चुका है उसका पट्टा, उसको खुद अपने हाथ से उसको मरम्मत कर रहे हैं. तो अब्दुल्ला इब्न अब्बास ने कहा कि भाई आपके मानने वाले लोग बैठे हैं बाहर, आप अपना वक्त जो है ज्यादा प्रोडक्टिवली वहां सर्फ करें, ये छोड़ें आप. अली खामोश रहे. जब अपनी जूतियों को सी चुके, जहां भी पट्टा जो है फट चुका था, اس کو رکھنے کے بعد علی نے کہا عبداللہ ابن عباس قیمھا، اس کی قیمت لگا۔ عبداللہ ابن عباس نے کہا کہ اس کے تو اتنے بوسیدہ حالت ہے کہ اس کو کوئی فری بھی نہیں خریدے گا۔ پھر بھی انہوں نے کہا قیمھا، قیمت لگاؤ اس کی۔ تو عبداللہ ابن عباس نے کہا کسر درہم، ایک درہم سے بھی کم۔ اس وقت علی کہتے ہیں کہ خداوند عالم کی قسم، میری نظر میں یہ جوتیاں جس کی قیمت کچھ نہیں ہے تیری نظر میں، محبوب تر ہیں اس بات سے کہ ہم تم پر حکومت کریں، مگر یہ کہ وہ حکومت صرف عدل و انصاف کے برقرار کرنے کے لیے۔ حکومت کا نظریہ علی کی نظر میں کچھ اور تھا۔ سقیفے کے واقعے کے بعد ابو سفیان آتا ہے علی کے دروازے پہ اور یہی کہتا ہے امام سے کہ ہمیں معلوم ہے حق آپ کا ہے اور حق آپ کا چھینا گیا ہے، اگر آپ کہیں تو ہم مدینہ کی گلیوں کو گھوڑوں سے یعنی سپاہیوں سے بھر دیں گے آپ کی حمایت میں۔ علی نے کہا کہ جاؤ ابو سفیان، ہم جانتے ہیں تمہاری نیت جو ہے خالص نہیں ہے، تم اس کیوٹک سچویشن سے ایڈوانٹیج لینا چاہ رہے، سوء استفادہ کرنا چاہ رہے۔ ابو سفیان بھی شاطر انسان تھا، فوراً چھوڑنے والا نہیں ہے اپنا مقصد، تو وہ اب للکارتا ہے اور جملہ اس نے کہا، علی کا نام نہیں لیا، کہا کہ ابو طالب کے بیٹے کے بارے میں یہ نہیں سوچا تھا کہ وہ مرنے سے ڈرتا ہے، یعنی اب للکار رہا ہے کہ آپ شاید مرنے سے ڈر رہے ہیں اس لیے نہیں نکل رہے ہیں۔ اس وقت علی نے کہا ابو سفیان چلے جاؤ یہاں سے، واللہ ابن ابی طالب لآنس بالموت من الطفل بثدی امہ، خدا کی قسم ابو طالب کا یہ بیٹا موت سے اتنا مانوس ہے جتنا شیرخوار بچہ ماں کے پستان سے مانوس نہیں ہوتا۔ ہم موت سے نہیں ڈرتے، ہمیں معلوم ہے حق کیا ہے، اور چونکہ ہمیں معلوم ہے ہم اس کی پرواہ نہیں ہے کہ ہم موت کی طرف جائیں یا موت ہماری طرف آئے۔ یہ جو ویلیو ہے، یہ جنریشن گیپ کی بات ہم لوگ کر رہے ہیں، یہ جملہ علی کا کہاں اور دوبارہ آیا پوتے کے زبان پہ، اس کو کہتے ہیں گیپ نہیں ہے وہاں۔ علی نے کہا تھا کہ ہمیں اس بات کی پرواہ نہیں ہے، لا ابالی اوقع الموت علی او وقعوا علی الموت۔ یہ قافلہ کربلا کی طرف جب روانہ ہو رہا تھا اور ایک منزل آئی کہ جہاں امام حسین علیہ السلام نے، جو ان کا گھوڑا آگے آگے تھا، تقریباً عالم رویا میں دیکھتے ہیں کہ کوئی آواز دے رہا ہے کہ یہ قافلہ موت کی طرف جا رہا ہے اور موت اس قافلے کی طرف آ رہی ہے۔ افاقہ ہوا زبان پر ان للہ و انا الیہ راجعون کا جملہ آ گیا۔ علی اکبر پیچھے پیچھے تھے ذرا اس زمانے کے آداب کے لحاظ سے، لیکن جب یہ جملہ سنا گھوڑے کو آگے بڑھاتے ہیں برابر میں، اب کہتے ہیں بابا یہ کلمہ حق ہے لیکن اس کے یہ موقع محل کیا ہے؟ حسین نے اس خواب کو بیان کیا۔ اس خواب کے سننے کے بعد علی اکبر کا صرف ایک سوال تھا، السنا علی الحق یا ابتا، بابا کیا ہم حق پہ نہیں ہیں؟ جب حسین نے کہا کہ یقیناً ہم حق پہ ہیں، اس وقت اکبر نے وہی جملہ دہرایا ہے جو علی کی زبان پہ تھا کہ اگر یہ بات ہے کہ ہم حق پر ہیں، لا نبالی نقع علی الموت او الموت وقع علینا، اس کی پرواہ نہیں ہے کہ موت ہماری طرف آئے یا ہم موت کی طرف جائیں۔ عاشور کے دن بھی آپ دیکھیں جو عظمت ہے جناب علی اکبر کی ان کے کردار میں۔ بنو ہاشم اصحاب کے بعد بنو ہاشم کے قربانی کا مرحلہ آتا ہے اور سال ہا سال ہو چکے ہیں، مختلف کتابوں کو ہم نے دیکھا ہے واقعات کربلا کے سلسلے میں، اور بڑے اعتماد کے ساتھ ہم یہ جملہ کہنا چاہیں گے کہ بنو ہاشم کا ہر فرد جب آیا ہے حسین کے سامنے اجازت طلب کرنے کے لیے، تو امام نے ہمیشہ انکار کیا، لیکن جب اس بندے نے اصرار کیا ہے تو آخر میں اجازت دیتے ہیں، چاہے اون محمد کی بات ہو، عبداللہ بن مسلم کی بات ہو، جناب قاسم کا معاملہ ہو، یا عباس جیسے بھائی اور ان کے بھائیوں کا معاملہ ہو، کہیں بھی آپ دیکھیں گے کہ امام نے ہمیشہ ہیزیٹیٹ کیا ہے، جون جیسے وفادار خدمت گزار کو بھی منع کیا ہے۔ لیکن اس پورے دن کی تاریخ میں ایک واقعہ ہمیں ملتا ہے، ایک موقع ملتا ہے کہ جہاں حسین نے ایک لمحے کے لیے بھی ہیزیٹیٹ نہیں کیا۔ جب آئے ہیں جناب علی اکبر، طبری کی روایت ہے استعذن فاذن له، بہت مختصر جملہ ہے، اکبر نے استعذن اجازت مانگی اور حسین نے فوراً اجازت دے دی۔ کیوں؟ قاسم کا معاملہ تھا، قاسم اولاد نہیں۔ عباس کا معاملہ تھا، عباس اولاد نہیں۔ تمام اعزا رشتہ دار تھے، لیکن جب جوان بیٹا سامنے آیا، حسین جانتے تھے خدا میرا امتحان لے رہا، وہاں ایک لمحے کے لیے بھی تامل نہیں کیا، فوراً اجازت دیتے ہیں۔ لیکن اجازت دینے کے بعد ایک جملہ کہا ہے، اکبر میری طرف سے تو اجازت ہے، لیکن وہ پھوپھی جنہیں تمہیں بچپنے سے پالا ہے ان سے بھی اجازت لے لو۔ اہل حرم کے خیموں میں جاتے ہیں، حمید بن مسلم اور دوسرے راویوں کے بیانات کہ اکبر بار بار کوشش کرتے تھے خیموں سے نکلنے کے لیے اور پردہ بار بار گر جاتا تھا، اس لیے کہ اہل حرم کو بھروسہ عباس پہ بھی تھا، حسین پر بھی تھا، لیکن اکبر پہ بھی تھا۔ اب یہ وہ مراحل ہیں کہ اب کوئی نہیں رہا، اور بار بار کبھی بہن آ جاتی ہیں، کبھی پھوپھیاں آ جاتی ہیں اور روکنا چاہتی ہیں۔ آخر میں جناب اکبر نکلے ہیں، امام حسین علیہ السلام نے سوار کیا، اور جب روانہ کرتے ہیں تو تھوڑی دیر کے بعد اکبر کو احساس ہوا کہ بابا پیچھے پیچھے آ رہے ہیں۔ گھوڑے کو روکا، مڑ کے جب دیکھتے ہیں تو ضعیف باپ جوان بیٹے کے پیچھے پیچھے چل رہا ہے۔ کہا بابا اجازت دے دی ہے۔ اس وقت حسین نے کہا بیٹا میرے دل کو جو کیفیت ہے صرف ہم جانتے ہیں کہ جوان بیٹے کو مقتل کی طرف روانہ کرنے کی کیا کیفیت ہوتی ہے۔ عزاداران حسین، اس وقت کا یہ مرحلہ ہے جہاں حسین نے اپنے ہاتھوں کو بلند کیا اور کہا خداوندہ تو گواہ رہنا، وہ جوان بیٹا جا رہا ہے جو رسول سے سیرت میں، صورت میں اور آواز میں شبیہ تھا۔ جب بھی تمنا ہوتی تھی زیارت رسول کی، میں اکبر کو دیکھ لیا کرتا تھا، لیکن وہ بھی آج روانہ ہو رہا ہے۔ عزاداران حسین، جناب اکبر جاتے ہیں، مقابلہ ہوتا ہے، ایک بہت بڑے بہادر یزیدی لشکر کے سپاہ کے بہادر کو جب شکست دیتے ہیں، شکست دینے کے بعد جناب علی اکبر واپس آتے ہیں، اور آنے کے بعد جناب امام حسین علیہ السلام سے ایک جملہ کہا ہے، یا ابتا ثقل الحدید اجحدنی والعطش قد قتلنی۔ بابا اسلحے کی سنگینی نے مجھے تھکا دیا ہے اور پیاس نے مجھے قتل کر دیا ہے، کیا کوئی سبیل ہے کہ پانی کا ایک قطرہ مل سکے؟ ہائے مظلومیت حسین، یہ ولی خدا ہے، کائنات کا تصرف ان کے ہاتھ میں دیا گیا ہے، لیکن آج حسین اتنا مجبور ہے امتحان سے، چاہتے تو نہر علقمہ کے رخ کو موڑ سکتے تھے، لیکن امتحان کا تقاضا تھا۔ اے حسین صبر سے کام لو۔ عزاداران حسین، آخر میں حسین نے اپنی زبان دی تاکہ احساس ہو بیٹے کو کہ بابا کی زبان تجھ سے بھی زیادہ سوکھی ہے، اور آخر میں روانہ کرتے ہیں۔ یہ کہتے ہوئے کہ بیٹا جاؤ تیرے جد انتظار میں ہے، پانی کا ایک کاسا لے کے انتظار میں ہے کہ تجھے سیراب کرے۔ دوران حسین جناب اکبر روانہ ہوتے ہیں دوبارہ، اور جنگ لڑنے کے بعد کئی لائنوں کو فنلار کرنے کے بعد جب چاروں طرف سے حملہ ہوتا ہے، یہاں تک کہ منقذ بن مرہ ملعون نے وہ نیزہ کا وار کیا جو اکبر کے سینے میں پیوست ہو جاتا ہے۔ جناب اکبر اپنے کو اب گھوڑے پر نہ سنبھال سکے، گھوڑے سے زمین پر آتے ہیں، لیکن زمین پر آنے کے بعد ایک عجیب انداز تھا، کہا السلام علیک یا بتا، بابا آپ پر آخری سلام ہو۔ یہ اس لیے کہا تھا کہ اب کوئی ناصر اور مددگار نہیں، بابا مدد کے لیے نہیں پکارا ہے، صرف آخری سلام قبول کرے۔ لیکن اس کے بعد ایک طولانی جملہ کہا ہے عزاداران حسین، وہ جملہ یہ تھا کہ بابا میرے جد علی آ چکے ہیں، انہوں نے مجھے سیراب کر دیا ہے، آپ کا بیٹا پیاسا نہیں۔ میں اکثر سوچتا ہوں کہ سینے میں یعنی لگی ہے نیزے کی، اور یقیناً آواز میں بھی تکلیف ہوگی، لیکن پھر بھی یہ جملہ کیوں کہا ہے؟ عزاداران حسین، جب حسین اکبر کو پانی نہ دے سکے، جو صدمہ چہرے پر تھا اس صدمے کو اکبر بھول نہ سکے، جب گھوڑے سے زمین پہ آئے تب آواز دی ہے بابا اب غم نہ کرنا کہ آپ نے بیٹے کو پانی نہیں دیا، دادا نے آ کے مجھے سیراب کر دیا ہے۔ امام حسین علیہ السلام اب کھڑے ہوئے جاتے ہیں مقتل پر، یا علی کہتے ہوئے، لیکن شیخ مفید کی روایت ہے کہ جب حسین اکبر کے لاش پر پہنچے، دیکھتے ہیں زینب موجود تھی، پوچھا بہن آنے کی وجہ کیا ہے؟ کہا بھائی جوان کا لاش ہے، حسین نے حکم دیا یہ میرا امتحان ہے، مجھے تنہا اس سے گزرنے دو۔ بیٹھتے ہیں زمین کربلا پر، جب دیکھا کہ اکبر کا ہاتھ سینے پہ ہے، ہاتھ ہٹاتے ہیں اور اس کے بعد نیزے کی ہنی کو پکڑا اور نکالتے وقت ایک جملہ کہا ہے بسم اللہ وعلی ملت رسول اللہ۔ یہ وہ جملہ ہے جو حاجی قربانی کے وقت ادا کرتا ہے، یہ قربانی تھی حسین کی اللہ کی خدمت میں۔ جب نیزے کی ہنی نکلی، اکبر کی روح بھی پرواز کر چکی، حسین نے جوان کی لاشے کو اٹھایا، کچھ قدم چلنے کے بعد زمین پر رکھ دیتے ہیں، خیموں کی طرف آواز دیتے ہیں اے بنو ہاشم کے بچوں، اس ضعیف باپ سے جوان کا لاشا نہیں اٹھ سکتا۔ ماتم حسین